people get inspired by the story. They're basically getting inspired by the vulnerability and the authenticity that someone they look up to is bringing to the issue. And it usually inspires people to then try to go find help for themselves, because they basically say, if Logic can do it, if Lamar can do it, if Sally Yates can do it, you pick the person can do it, then surely I can go do it as well.
It is my pleasure to have my friend here. It's a long story about how we met. We'll have to tell you that some other time. He is a phenomenal human being. I always talk about him as a real ally to all different kinds of people. Like, he really shows up. He's as I tell him often, like the master connector. He knows everybody, he connects everybody, and he's just a phenomenal human being. And it's my pleasure to have Phil Schermer from Project Healthy Minds here on the podcast. Welcome, Phil.
Hey, Dr. Alfiee, it's so good to be speaking with you today.
Oh my God, the pleasure is all mine. So, by way of introduction, I would love for you to just talk to our audience briefly about who you are, about this beautiful organization that you founded, and maybe why you founded it.
Yeah. Well, maybe what I can do, if it's okay with you, I'll take us back to the origin story, because I think it'll give us a sense of sort of what we're doing. So, about 3.5 years ago, I was at breakfast with two friends of mine in New York who manage a bunch of well-known musicians. And one of those artists is a hip hop artist by the name of Logic. And Logic put out a song in April of 2017. The title of the song was the phone number of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, the 1-800 number. And the song was about Logic's own mental health journey, which is really rooted, if you talk to his team, in the fact that he's biracial. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Gaithersburg, Maryland, youngest of 6 or 7 kids. And like a lot of kids who are biracial, struggle with the sense of identity and belonging that fueled his own mental health journey. So the song was him basically coming out about his own mental health journey. And so I knew the song extremely well. The song went 7 times platinum. It was nominated for 2 Grammys. So I knew the song as a fan, as a friend of Chris and Harry's. What I didn't know, what I learned from his managers over this breakfast, was the day that song was released, the suicide hotline saw the second highest call volume in its history, behind the death of Robin Williams. A few months later, he performed that song at the MTV Video Music Awards. There was a 50% spike in call volume to the hotline. A few months after that, he performed the song as the closing set at the Grammys. There was a 300% spike in call volume to the hotline. And then when we hit the 1-year mark of the song release, so April of 2018, the hotline published a report showing that call volume was up 30% year over year since the day the song had been released. Mm-hmm. And that was my response. Chris and Harry told me the story, and I was blown away by it. And, interestingly, there was actually a study that came out a couple months ago that showed that not only was call volume up, but it was in the British Medical Journal, and actually showed that there were the number of people who were saved by the impact of the song. So they tell me the story. I'm blown away by the story. I come off the breakfast, and I felt like, at the time, I felt like there is this generational loneliness that exists for pretty much everyone my age. And most people don't talk about it. They'll never tell you, they'll never use the word lonely, but they'll describe what it is to feel lonely. And I felt like these two things had to relate in some way. And I decided I was going to go on this long research journey. And what I basically found, and you obviously know this better than anyone, your audience knows this, but just to give a frame of reference for how we landed on what we do, is, you've got 65 million Americans with a mental health condition, 60% of people, 6 in 10, who don't get any form of mental health care. 3 primary drivers. 1 is the stigma. 2 is that people don't know where to go to get help. And 3 is that they can't access care because of insurance constraints and the lack of professionals make care really expensive. I was looking at those first 2 causes of the gap, stigma and the fact that it's hard to find help, and realized that the song was this unbelievable public health case study for how you close the treatment gap, right? You had this 28-year-old hip hop star coming out of the closet about his own mental health journey, creating the permission structure for others to do the same, destigmatizing the issue. And the title of the song was the phone number of where you call to get help. And the key was, when those 2 things were done in tandem, you saw skyrocketing rates of help-seeking behavior, people calling the hotline and asking for help. And I was blown away by that. And what I basically realized in that moment was that if you could take the core dynamics of what was happening there and blow it out into sort of an organization, you could replicate the core model of what was happening there. So what did that mean? It meant that on one hand, on the stigma side, you had to go partner with public figures, people that others look up to. And just like the LGBTQ movement of the last 25 years, where people come
Yes.
out of the closet and it inspires somebody else to share their truth publicly, you need to do the same thing on mental health. And you need it across every corner of society. You need musicians and actors but also you need business leaders and political leaders and, kids you see on YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah.
And so that's one piece of the equation, is how do you then go partner with people, and how do you take sort of like high quality marketing, communications, influencer strategy, and use it so you have real rigor behind it. That's one piece. The other piece is you have to replicate, in the same way that the title of the song was the phone number of the hotline that makes it easier to find help. How do you do that at scale? And our answer to that was basically to take the discovery marketplace model, the aggregator model, what you normally see like kayak.com or Expedia or cheap tickets, or for restaurant reservations, your Open Table or your Resi. Take that model and reapply it to the discovery of mental health services across the whole spectrum, from meditation, mindfulness, to therapy, to psychiatry, peer-to-peer support, community support groups, crisis lines, whether you want a digital tool or an in-person service. Our belief is there should be one place on the internet for finding mental health services, vetted by clinicians, but free for the public to use. And if you do that, then every time you partner with a public figure, there's one place that you're driving people to go to find help, whatever kind of help they might need. So that's how we got it all started.
Oh my God. That is phenomenal. And it's such an easy pitch, and it's so clear. And a lot of that I did not know, right? Some of it I did, right? My favorite song by Logic is Ballin'. That's my jam. I love that song. But like, I think I know most of the lyrics, but anyway, don't quote me on it. And I think that there's something powerful about exactly what you said when you think about sort of these three buckets of things that keep people out of care. And then your focus is to go in and target each of those three buckets, not individually, but in aggregate. So if you, like you said, to use your words, if you do it in tandem, then like you're just exploding the opportunity for people to get exactly what they need. And the other thing about being an aggregator, again, coming back to this idea, my thing is always diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I appreciate is when you're an aggregator, you put everything in place, I feel like, and if you do it with intentionality, which is what you all do, then you give people an opportunity to find something for themselves that resonates with them. And so I think in the mental health space, there's often this piece of people will put, I don't know, services in front of you. But for a lot of people, the services that are placed in front of them don't feel like they resonate, right? And so it's curated by somebody else, which means it's not curated by me, which means I may not be feeling that. And so what you all have done is create something where people can go into that one hub and they can find what they can curate it for themselves. So can you talk a little bit about what is that hub? What is that aggregator? What does it look like when you partner with, I remember we did the event with Lamar Odom and Mad Happy. That was fun. Mm-hmm. First of all, because I'm not, I don't know if I can say I'm not the biggest Lakers fan, but I get the mystique, right? I'm the Lakers era when it was Shaq. Like Shaq's my dude. I love Shaq. But the idea of having Lamar on, right, with the other group of us who were there, he's going to draw a certain audience. And he's going to draw an audience that might not otherwise be pulled in. And so, thinking, just using it as a jumping off point, if someone goes to one of your events, virtual or in person, and they see a Lamar, somebody like him, or they see a Logic or somebody like him, what happens when you say, okay, and here are the resources that you can access? Where do they go and what are they going to find there?
Yeah. So it's interesting. First of all, what we find is every time that we create content or do an event or do any kind of partnership activation with a public figure, it always leads to people people get inspired by the story. They're basically getting inspired by the vulnerability and the authenticity that someone they look up to is bringing to the issue. And it usually inspires people to then try to go find help for themselves, because they basically say, if Logic can do it, if Lamar can do it, if Sally Yates can do it, you pick the person can do it, then surely I can go do it as well. Where we are right now, we basically have what in tech land you call the minimum viable product, which is on our website, and it has more than 70 mental health services across the whole spectrum. And the way I think about it, it's only the beginning. I think 12 months from now, you'll be looking at 2, 3, 4x the number of mental health services that exist there. But part of one of the challenges that we're trying to solve. So we're maniacally focused on the discoverability process.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
And if you think about it, when you have an opaque market where people don't know where to go to find mental health service or whatever kind of service it is, products and services, it is the people who are the most educated and the wealthiest who have the network to figure out where they're going. And even in the mental health space, it's so bad that even the wealthiest and most educated still spend an enormous amount of time and struggle to find what they're looking for. So if that's the case for folks who live in New York, imagine what it's like for somebody who's growing up in Pittsburgh or in Georgia or in Mississippi. And part of why we think a discovery marketplace is so important is, there's an element to this, which is around sort of the health piece, like depending on how severe your anxiety or depression is, like what kinds of services should you be using. But there's also an element that's not health related. That's like, do you have insurance? Yes or no? Because that is going to impact what you can even access. What kind of insurance? Is it private insurance? Is it public insurance? Right? Where do you live? What zip code are you in? Because if you want to see somebody in person, if you want to go to a support group in person or see a therapist in person, like your zip code matters a lot. How do you identify? What's your sexual orientation? All of these things, when you don't have a marketplace, there's no single place to go to find exactly what you're looking for. And so if you're, 19 years old in somewhere in Illinois and Black and gay and identify as a woman, and you are trying to find somebody who looks like you, has similar experiences to you, that's going to be really difficult. And so that's why we're focused on how can we build something at a national level that allows people to basically input a combination of their own mental health status, but also all of the other preferences and constraints so they can find what they're looking for. It should be, to me, I think it should be as easy to find mental health help as it is to order an Uber or a Lyft or book a restaurant reservation on Resy. And it's not that it's technically impossible. It's just that we have to take the models that exist in the for-profit tech space and reapply them in the mental health space.
I love it. I love it. And so there's the tech aspect of it, then talk a little bit about the human aspect of it. What kind of things do you all hear at your organization from when people we used to call it behavioral activation, when they get the activation and go into the marketplace and find something that might work for them? What kind of responses do you hear from people?
It's the reason why we do the work. They're really inspiring. And it's, it's similar to the kind of stuff that you've spent your whole life dedicated to. But, I'll tell you, we got an email from somebody the day after we released the MVP, who told us a story about how she had grown up in a household where she had a parent who struggled with a serious mental illness. And so she had always, from her childhood, she was very exposed and aware of mental health. It had shaped her childhood in profound ways, her and her siblings. It had also shaped her appreciation for the need to manage your mental health. She had off and on had different therapists. She went to an unbelievable college. She went to work in New York at a big financial services company. So this girl is as smart and empathetic as it comes, and has real lived experience. And the note that she wrote us was that she had for years wanted to find a support group where she could meet other people like herself who had family members. And because one of the gaps she had always felt was that she had these therapists who were great in so many respects, but if you're a parent if you haven't grown up in a household where you had a parent with a serious mental illness, it's a lot harder to really understand all the nuances of it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and she had put it off because she knew she should have found the support group, and she had tried looking online a bunch of times, but it was so difficult to find what she was looking for, just Googling or reading Reddit threads or looking, that she had just put it off. She said, okay, I'll deal with this tomorrow. But tomorrow becomes next week, and next week becomes next month, and next
That's
month
right.
becomes next year. And
That's
suddenly you're
right.
going years before you're getting help. And so she wrote this whole note about how basically in 4 clicks, she had found what she was looking for. And she had gone every Wednesday from September and through today. This is true as of today. Every single Wednesday night, she goes to this support group, even when her father was having brain surgery at Northwestern. She stepped out, went to the car, and joined the support group. And so to me, that's the reason why we do the work, which is like, even for people who are as smart and savvy on this issue as possible, even folks like that find it hard to find what they're looking for. How do we make it easier for everybody to find what they're looking for?
Oh my God. That's so powerful in 4 clicks. Like, just honestly, being someone who spent her career in disparities research and really trying to figure out how do we close these gaps between what people need and what's out there. You all are really figuring out how you close that gap. And so it just gets my brain going and thinking about, in the context of what we've all been experiencing over the past 2.5, 3 years with the pandemic and with quarantine and with all these daggone variants. Like, it feels like every day there's a new variant. And even now, personally, me knowing at least 3 people who actually have tested positive for COVID, and just, worrying, the angst and all that kind of anxiety that comes with that, hoping that they're going to be okay and all that, and hoping they have what they need. I wonder how this overlap of everything that you all have been building, which sounds like right before the pandemic, right? You were already building, and then the pandemic hits us. How has that impacted, or I don't know, has it had any kind of impact on the work that you all do, number one, and I think probably more importantly, the need that's out there?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on it. I mean, it basically, COVID basically poured gasoline all over what was already a raging fire, and sort of turned it into an inferno. And, there's a million, reports you can go read about the increase. There was a JAMA study last year about the prevalence of depression increasing more than 3x. There was that CDC report, it was about a year ago, that showed that 1 in 4 young people 18 to 24 years old had seriously considered suicide in the previous month. I mean, basically any metric you look at, you just see these incredible increases. And, because we are not taught about mental health from a young age, when you have a whole bunch of people for the first time realizing that they have something that they got to deal with here, and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, you need, in my view, to build aggregators that make the discovery process easier. Like, a lot of people don't even know how to distinguish between, a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist. They're like, I don't even understand what these 3 words mean. I mean, I like, is a therapist a category term for both of these? Do I need to see someone who has a master's level, degree? Can I use someone who's just, licensed social worker? Do they have specialties? How do I find them? And so, like, if that's the base that you're working off of, then to me, it's really important that you find ways to build marketplace, to build products that make that discovery journey intuitive. Part of the long-term vision for the marketplace is, this better than anybody. Like, we have a fundamental shortage of mental health professionals in this country, which is even greater for communities of color and for low-income communities. And part of what, one of the real value props of a marketplace is it gives you tremendous data to understand the people who are using it and then what kinds of services they're using it for, but perhaps most importantly, where the gaps are. And I think that the opportunity to use that data to surface where the gaps are so that we can encourage more social entrepreneurs and, for-profit entrepreneurs and capital, philanthropic capital and private capital to build and invest in this space, to me is really important, because at the end of the day, even if we passed national policy today, it would still take an enormous amount of time to meet the full demand, supply gap that we have. And so what we need is, we basically need an all of the above approach to help fill the gap. And to me, that starts with data. It's a lot easier to ignore the severity of a crisis when you are able to put your hands over your eyes and ignore it. But when you have data that shows the mismatch between the demand and the supply down to different individual communities, it forces a conversation that you can otherwise sort of gloss over.
That's right. And I think that there's this idea, I don't know. I think there's this idea, I feel like there's two camps. There's the camp that's like, we'll get there when we get there in terms of fulfilling the need. Because there's a camp where all they do is surface what the issues are, right? And somebody else is going to fix it. And then there's this camp where it's like, no, this is urgent. I feel like this is the camp that we're in. No, this is urgent. We have to do something right now. And everybody, to your point, everybody's not going to pick up and go to therapy. That's just not everybody's thing. And so what is the stopgap in between? And one thing that I really love that you mentioned that I'm always very curious about is, what is the role of business, right? What role do businesses have in ensuring that there's something available for workers, right? And I feel like there is a responsibility. I'm not sure that I always see that businesses understand that there is a role for them. And I feel like when I watch the activations that you all engage in at Project Healthy Minds, I'm always thinking to myself, everybody they partner with, those are places where you probably want to go work, right? Because they get it, right? And so I think about like Mad Happy and some of these others. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, how do you all identify these partners you want to work with? Because the same way that you mentioned, people might decide or understand or recognize, or it surfaces that they have a need, and then they're not sure where to go to get the need fulfilled. I also think that there's something about, for anybody out there who like is a mental health activist, a mental health advocate, who has their own nonprofit or business where they want to get into this space, sort of like Project Healthy Minds or the Acoma Project is doing, but they have no idea how to find these businesses to partner with without divulging trade secrets. What would you say are some of the, what kind of things do you all look for in how you decide to partner with different types of organizations?
But I'll tell you maybe a couple of things here. One is, mental health is in my view, mental health is on the same glide path that climate change has been on for the last decade, right? If you think about it, a lot of the climate change movement, it really came out of like activists and scientists and pushing researchers pushing it. And then we started to hit a tipping point in the last, you can call it, 7-10 years. Some people would say really in the last like 2-3 years, where suddenly every business now is trying to measure its carbon impact. Right. And it's disclosing it publicly. And there has become a real focus on operating in a way that is sustainable isn't just the morally right thing to do. It's actually good business, that actually companies that are more sustainable perform better over the long run. And in sort of the investment world, that's sort of called the materiality test. Does operating sustainably, is that material to the long-term financial performance of a company, right?
Yes.
So what I take a step back before I answer your exact question is like, what I think the next 10 years looks like is we have to prove that employee mental health is material to the long-term financial performance of corporations. Because if we can prove that, then you have an economic case for why companies ought to invest in supporting employee mental health in ways that they don't even dream of today.
Yes.
I think that what COVID did was it basically forced everybody to address an issue in mental health that many people had overlooked for a long time. So there is a greater recognition among companies right now that they need to do more on employee mental health, but they don't know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. What you find by and large, I think, in my experience, and I'd be curious what your experience was, but my experience is it usually starts at the top. And so it's like, is the CEO or is a member of the leadership team of the company committed to this issue and committed to this issue in such a way that they're willing to talk about it publicly and with their colleagues? Because fundamentally, whether a company is progressive on mental health is really rooted in, does the leadership of the company prioritize mental health? It doesn't matter how many trainings they do, how many, whether they license Calm or Headspace. None of those things matter if the CEO isn't role modeling that mental health is a priority to them and to the company. And so to me, we try to look for, okay, where are there businesses where the leaders of the business value mental health, who are willing to, because the truth is everybody's got a story. It may be your own story, maybe your kid's story, maybe your parents' story, maybe your sibling's story, maybe your friend's story, but everybody has a connection to the issue. And so the question is, can you find leaders who are willing to basically lead through vulnerability? And if the answer is yes, then you've got a really good partner. So that's sort of what we look for. And the thing that I think is exciting about this moment is, as we shift from a sort of manual labor style economy to a knowledge economy. When you were in a manual labor based economy, you needed workers that were physically strong to build things, right?
Yes.
When you're in a knowledge economy, you need workers that are mentally strong and resilient, right? Burnout becomes a fundamental economic threat. And so I think the reason why I say it is I think we have the wind at our sails, but the job is basically how do the advocates and activists translate what we all know to be the case into the parlance of the business world and show them the value of doing this, not just the moral value, but the economic value of supporting people this way.
Oh, I love that. I love that shift from manual labor to the knowledge labor. That's so true, because when you have so much that occurs in the virtual space, you don't necessarily need like that physical labor. But what you do need, that's not to say you don't need it at all. Of course you do. But it is to say that a reliance on what's up here, which is tied to what's in here as part of the workplace, means that you got to take care of both of these. And I think that if you don't, then you're going to lose one or the other, right? But either way, you're not getting the full benefit of who that person is. Because at the Acoma Project, we're always talking about, everyone deserves an opportunity to achieve optimal mental health, because the idea is we want you to be able to show up as your authentic self, right? Like unapologetically as who you are. And that if you have mental health challenges that are unaddressed, that's a gap, right? That creates a gap between who you are and who you're showing up as day to day. And we want both of those things to be in lockstep. So I just love that the imagery and the idea of we have to take care of people because the economy is shifting and we want to be able to move in the direction of where this economy is going. I love that. All right. So the final thing I'm going to ask you about is a series of questions. And I just want you to, if you need a second to think, you probably don't, because you're Phil, all right here. But I would love to hear, there are probably 2 series of questions. What I would love to hear is the top 3 things that you have learned thus far on this journey with Project Healthy Minds.
Okay. Probably the organizing thing that I have learned is essentially how many people hide from full view who they really are and all of their life experiences and all of their trauma and pain. And the reason why I've learned that is because when you see high profile people, whether it's a Logic or a Carson Daly or whoever it is, come out about their own mental health journey, what you find is you then start, and Dr. Alfiee, I know you get these calls. Everybody then calls you afterward and tells you a whole story that they want to tell you that is deeply personal. They've never told anybody before. And what it basically, I think, reveals is the shared humanity that we all have, including the shared fears of social exclusion if we reveal something about ourselves that doesn't feel perfect, right? I think that is sort of the animating thing that I have learned. Beyond that, I mean, I will tell you, it is shocking to me how the stigma around mental health manifests itself in so many harmful, discriminatory ways. Like the fact that the healthcare system treats even mental health different from physical health. And I mean, it's really sort of shocking. And there's a difference from when you are somebody who is looking for mental health services. When you suddenly start trying to study the space, you realize whatever you think, however screwed up you think it is beforehand, you realize it's 20 times more screwed up once you dig into it.
That's right. That part.
But what I would say is the third thing I've learned, and this is the hopeful answer, which is that I do think that we are at the beginning of a different era. I think that younger people have this younger generation, not to fall into tropes, but like I do think that Gen Z and millennials do have a fundamentally different view about mental health, driven by a lot of things, but also driven by social and digital addiction, but also driven by the transparency that social has brought to our lives. And so the greater recognition that we have that other people are dealing with depression and anxiety. So, technology is a mixed bag, and there are some positives, there are some negatives. But I do think that when you talk to younger people, I will tell you, I think a lot of people who are young in this country do believe that mental health and climate change will be among two of the defining issues of our generation in ways that they were not for previous generations, right?
100%.
I mean, I don't, I'm not a historian, but I don't recall learning about, I recall a lot about civil rights movement. And there is still a ton to do. I don't recall any equivalent in the mental health space. I don't know of any history of where mental health advocates have studied the civil rights movement or the gender equality movement or any of that stuff. And I think that's what we have ahead of us, which is a younger generation that has a different view and that is going to prioritize mental health alongside these other issues in ways that they never did before. And that's what gives me hope, is I think there's a real chance for change.
I love that. I love that. I agree 100%. As a Gen Xer, I agree 100%. We didn't talk about any of it. So my final question, and this may require a little bit of thinking, but it may come right off the top of your head too. Is there any business, influencer, celebrity, any kind of entity out there who's on your dream list of someone or some group or something that you want to partner with through Project Healthy Mind?
I got three people off the top of my head. One is Tim Cook. And I'll tell you why. I think the role that Tim Cook played in changing attitudes around what it means to be gay in the workplace was remarkable. And I think that, if you study Tim Cook, he talks about mental health as a defining issue of our generation, and one of Apple's roles getting to be around health. And I think that there is a real opportunity. I feel like the entertainment world and the creative world has led on this issue, but now we need business leaders to step out. And getting somebody at that level, I think, is a dynamic changing kind of opportunity. So that would be who I would say as my number one. There's a long list of folks. I mean, I would say, everyone from Laurene Powell Jobs and Melinda Gates to, there are Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole. I mean, there are folks who are doing stuff about mental health or who talk about it. But for whom I think they have so much influence, so many people follow them and look up to them that they can set the tone in a totally different way.
100%.
And I would put in the last one is Chance the Rapper, because I think Chance has a real, platform and ethos that works on an issue like this.
I love it. All of those, all of those, they're phenomenal. And there was just this article that came out about, I don't know if J. Cole was in it, but I know Kendrick was in it. They talked about Kendrick, Drake, a couple other people talking about in their raps, therapy, right? And I know Kendrick's new album came out. Like, I was listening to it and he's got some bops on there. And like, just very clearly is talking about, right? I think there's a part of it where he talks about having daddy issues, right? And I'm like, what? How many brothers, right? Like, so many men of so many different racial ethnic groups, like, they can relate to that, right? And just sort of what all of that means. And then there was this great song by the sister, I adore her. Y'all should partner with her too, Rhapsody. And she talks about one of her songs, it's women's empowerment and how, Black men treat Black women. And there's Kendrick raps on it. And he talks about in it how the power of words. So a father and his daughter, if he's speaking beauty and positivity over her, is a whole different trajectory than if he has unresolved trauma and that's what he's communicating to his baby girl. And it's just so powerful. So I'm gonna cross my fingers. We're gonna put it in the universe that you're gonna partner with all these folks. And look, when you get any one of, y'all better call me because I'm there. I'll be right there. So yes. So Phil, I just want to thank you so much for spending some time with me. I know my dad has this thing where he says you're running between the raindrops because you're moving so fast. And I know you got 50 million other things on your plate today. And I just want to acknowledge in this moment as we're recording, we're both in this space where we've had these multiple mass shootings. And we know that vicarious trauma is real. And I just want to honor the fact that you gave some time today. I want to recognize even for myself that today is one of those days where it's kind of hard to show up. It's better than it was yesterday, because yesterday I was a little bit closer to it. And so I appreciate you. I thank you for everything that you are doing. I'm so happy that we connected and that our worlds collided. And I'm also so happy that you connected me with your boy, because he's a phenomenal mental health advocate. And I just adore him, Carson Daly. I appreciate you and your whole board and everything that you all are doing and all the people who work for Project Healthy Minds. And I hope that, and I know we will stay connected, but anytime I and the Acoma Project can be a support to you all, we're always happy to. So thank you for everything that you do.
Well, right back at you, Dr. Alfiee. I mean, you are a real light in this space. And I'll tell you, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I belonged to Tree of Life Synagogue, where the mass shooting was in 2018. I got bar mitzvah there. My brother got bar mitzvah there. My parents still belong there. And so days like this, I mean, I still remember getting the call when the news broke. I was in Philadelphia when the shooting happened in 2018. And it is because of people like you who do this work and frankly have been doing this work long before people like me started into this space. You're really the one that we all owe a debt of gratitude toward and a thank you toward. So thank you for being such a light for so many people and for doing this work and for leading us.
I won't say anything else. I'll just say thank you, and I appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Alfiee.